I appreciate that we even had a conversation, Margaret. That was my son's remark to me. My own son, the child I nurtured, supported, and financed through business school using the resources from the company my husband and I built from the ground up. Those words lingered in the air like poison. And what did I do? I smiled, nodded, and fell completely silent because I already knew something they did not. Hello, everyone. My name is Margaret Ann Hutcherson, and I am 72 years old. I'm speaking to you from my home office in Portland, Oregon, situated in a building that bears only my name on the deed. Please share in the comments where you are joining me from. I would love to know that I am not alone in what I am about to share. This is the story of how I lost my family and found my strength. It is about how I learned that silence can be the most powerful weapon you possess, and how a lifetime of being underestimated became my greatest asset. Let me take you back to 1975. I was 22 years old, freshly graduated from secretarial school, working at a small accounting firm in downtown Portland. It was there that I met Robert Hutcherson. He was 30, ambitious, and had just inherited a small printing press from his uncle, though the business was failing. Robert had passion, but lacked a head for numbers, organizational skills, and patience for the paperwork essential for a business's survival. I fell in love with him on our third date, and we were married 6 months later. Robert aspired to build an empire, as he often said. Back then, our empire consisted of a single printing press in a rented warehouse that smelled of ink and mildew. I continued working at the accounting firm during the day and would go to the warehouse every evening. While Robert managed the creative side and client relationships, I took care of everything else: the invoices, taxes, payroll for our first employee, and negotiations with suppliers who attempted to overcharge us, assuming we were just kids playing business. I immersed myself in the printing industry, studying our competitors and identifying cheaper suppliers without compromising quality. I implemented inventory management systems that saved us thousands. When Robert sought to expand into commercial printing in 1981, I was the one who calculated the finances, secured the loan, and ensured we could afford the new equipment. By 1985, Hutcherson Printing was not merely surviving, it was thriving. We had 20 employees, moved into a proper facility, and secured contracts with 3 major corporations. Robert was the face of the company, and I was content with that. He loved the spotlight. I loved the work. We had 2 children, David, born in 1979, and Caroline, born in 1982. I balanced what many women of my generation did, working full-time at the business and at home. I prepared lunches, attended parent-teacher conferences, and ensured homework was completed, all while managing the company's finances and operations. Robert would introduce me as his secret weapon. "This business would collapse without Margaret," he would say at company gatherings. I believed he meant it. Robert passed away in 2003 from a heart attack, sudden and devastating. He was 58 years old, and we had been married for 28 years. By then, the company had expanded significantly. We employed 75 people and generated millions in annual revenue, having ventured into digital printing and graphic design services. According to our legal documents, Robert and I were equal partners, with a 50-50 ownership structure. David was 24 when his father died, and Caroline was 21. Both had worked summer jobs at the company while growing up, though neither exhibited much interest in the actual business. David had earned his MBA and was employed at a tech startup in Seattle, while Caroline was completing her marketing degree. At the funeral, David assured me, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll come home and help you run the business. Dad would want that." I should have paid attention to the phrasing, "help you run it," not "help run it with you." 2 months later, David returned to Portland, wanting to be named Vice President of Operations, demanding his own office, a significant salary, and a company car. He had grand ideas about modernizing everything, despite lacking any experience in the printing industry. I insisted he start in client relations, believing he needed to understand our customers and learn the business from the ground up, just as his father and I had. He was furious, declaring, "I have an MBA from a top business school. I don't need to work my way up in my own family's company." His own family's company, not our company. His. Caroline joined us in 2005 after graduating. She wanted to oversee marketing, despite our excellent marketing director, who had been with us for 8 years. When I suggested she work in the marketing department to learn from our director, she accused me of being controlling. "You just can't stand the idea of us having real roles here," she said. "You want to keep all the power for yourself." The power I had built, the systems I had created, the relationships I had nurtured for decades. Nonetheless, I granted Caroline a position in marketing and increased David's responsibilities, thinking that was what mothers do, make room for their children. I did not realize they expected me to diminish. Over the next few years, changes unfolded slowly at first, but then escalated. David began making decisions without consulting me, committing us to contracts I had not reviewed and overriding my instructions to staff. When I confronted him, he accused me of micromanaging. When I attempted to uphold the standards that had built the business, Caroline told staff members I was old-fashioned and resistant to change. She would roll her eyes during meetings when I spoke. Once, when I questioned a marketing campaign she proposed that seemed off-brand, she stated in front of the entire team, "Maybe you just don't understand modern marketing, Mom. Things have changed since the 80s." As if I had stopped learning and adapting the moment I turned 40. David brought in expensive consultants who knew little about our industry but had impressive credentials. They recommended restructuring the company and establishing a new executive hierarchy. One suggestion was that I transition into a founder advisory role and step back from daily operations. "It's time to think about succession planning," David said. "You're almost 70, Mom. You should be enjoying your retirement, not working yourself to death." I was 68, swimming a mile 3 times a week with a sharp mind, and I was not ready to be sidelined. Yet they persisted, holding meetings without me, discussing strategies over family dinners, and stopping their conversations when I entered the room. They formed a united front in disagreements, and our board meetings became nightmarish. David and Caroline would present proposals as if they had already been decided. When I voiced concerns, they exchanged glances, patient, condescending looks that conveyed, "There goes Mom again." The staff began approaching David and Caroline with questions instead of me, not because they wanted to, as I later discovered, but because my children instructed them to. "Margaret is transitioning into retirement," they said. "Bring operational questions to us." I was being erased from the company I had built, from the business that would not exist without me. Thanksgiving 2015 crystallized everything. We gathered at my house, the home Robert and I purchased in 1987, which I retained after his passing. I had spent 2 days preparing the meal: turkey, stuffing, 3 types of pie, and all the traditional dishes my children loved. David arrived with his wife Jessica and their 2 children, while Caroline came with her fiancé Tom. Just as we sat down, David cleared his throat. "Mom, Jessica and I have been discussing it, and we think it's time to talk about your future at the company." Thanksgiving dinner was not the appropriate time for that discussion. Caroline interjected, "It's a family business. When else would we discuss family matters?" Jessica nodded supportively, and Tom appeared uncomfortable, but said nothing. David suggested I transition to an honorary chairman role, where I would technically remain part of the company, but they would handle all operations and strategic decisions. "You'd be free to travel and spend time with your grandchildren," he added. "I enjoy my life now," I replied. "Mom," Caroline interjected, her voice edged. "You're 70 years old, 68, whatever. The point is, it's time. You've worked hard enough. Let us take over." I was not ready to retire, I stated firmly. "When I am, I will let you know." The room's atmosphere shifted dramatically. "You're being selfish," David accused. "You're holding us back because you can't let go." "I built this company," I said quietly. "You and Dad built it." Caroline corrected. "And Dad's gone. Now it's our turn." Our turn? I thought, as if a business were something to be passed around like a toy on a playground. The rest of the dinner was strained. My grandchildren were the only bright spot, oblivious to the tension as they requested more pie. When everyone left, David did not hug me goodbye. Caroline kissed my cheek, but it felt perfunctory and cold. I cleaned the kitchen alone and cried for the first time since Robert's funeral. That night, I struggled to sleep. I kept reflecting on David's phrase, transition to chairman emeritus. It felt rehearsed, planned, not a casual conversation, but a proposal they had discussed extensively. On Monday, I visited Leonard Brennan, our company attorney, who had handled our legal matters since 1989. He was 75, sharp as ever, and one of the few who remembered when Hutchin printing was just me, Robert, and a dream. Leonard, I began, settling into the chair across from his desk. I need you to pull all the corporate documents, every single one. I want to review the ownership structure, bylaws, succession plans, everything. He regarded me carefully. Margaret, is something wrong? I don't know yet, I replied. That's what I'm trying to find out. It took him 3 days to compile everything. When I returned to his office, a file box awaited me. I spent a week reviewing every document, and that's when I discovered it. Buried in a contract David had presented to me 8 months earlier, one he claimed was merely a standard update to our corporate structure, was a clause, a small clause, easy to overlook if you weren't searching for it. It stipulated that if I stepped down or was deemed unable to fulfill my duties as co-owner, my shares would be automatically distributed to my children in equal parts. I had signed it, trusting him. I vividly recall that day, a Tuesday afternoon in March 2015. David entered my office, exuding confidence with a leather portfolio in hand. "Mom, I have some paperwork for you to sign. Just routine corporate maintenance." I was distracted and fatigued, working on a proposal for a major client. He laid out 5 documents, each marked with sticky arrows indicating where to sign. He quickly explained each one: new banking resolution, updated liability insurance, corporate structure clarification, standard forms. I signed them all, never fully reading them because he was my son, and I trusted him. That realization struck me like a physical blow. I had raised this man, changed his diapers, stayed awake with him during nightmares, and put him through college, only to discover he had deliberately deceived me to set a trap. But that wasn't all. I continued digging. I found printed emails David had filed away, emails between him and Caroline strategizing ways to remove me. One email from July 2015 sent a chill down my spine. See, Mom's becoming more difficult about the modernization initiatives. We need to accelerate the timeline. I'm thinking we push for the advisory role transition by early 2016. We can frame it as honoring her legacy. People respond to that emotional angle. Let me know your thoughts. Caroline responded, agreed. We should start documenting any mistakes she makes. Build a case if she resists. They were plotting against me as if I were a hostile takeover target, not their mother. I found consultant reports recommending my removal that had never been shared with me. One report, dated September 2015, suggested I represented a bottleneck to innovation and that the company would benefit from generational leadership change. The consultant had been paid $15,000 for that report. Company money, my money. I discovered budget proposals allocating a significantly reduced salary for me while substantially increasing theirs. In one draft budget, my salary was cut by 60%, while David's increased by 40% and Caroline's by 30%. Then I found the calendar entry. On David's calendar, synced with the company system, was an entry 6 months out that read, "Board meeting, vote on Margaret's transition to advisory role." It was scheduled, planned, and inevitable in their minds. They were conspiring to force me out, my own children. I sat in Leonard's conference room, surrounded by documents, evidence of betrayal, and felt something shift within me. My sadness transformed into something else, cold and focused. I called my longtime assistant, Patricia, who had been with me for 18 years and remained loyal, even as David and Caroline attempted to sideline me. "Patricia, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to keep it completely confidential. Can you do that?" "Of course, Margaret. What do you need?" "I need copies of every communication David and Caroline have sent through company systems for the past 2 years. Emails, calendar entries, internal memos, everything. Can you access that without them knowing?" After a pause, she replied, "I can. And Margaret, I'm glad you're finally doing something about this. What they've been doing to you isn't right." Of course, she noticed. I wondered how many other employees had observed what was happening and felt powerless to intervene. Patricia worked her magic over the next week. delivering everything on a secure flash drive. I spent hours reviewing it all. Each email, each dismissive comment about me, and each strategic discussion about how to ease me out only strengthened my resolve. I found an email thread from October where Caroline wrote to David, "She's being stubborn about the Henderson account. I don't know why she's so attached to these old clients. They're not even that profitable anymore." The Henderson account had been one of our first major contracts. Mr. Henderson had trusted us when no one else would, and his company had remained loyal for 30 years. My daughter viewed that loyalty as a liability instead of an asset. In another email, David expressed, "I think we need to consider that she might be showing early signs of cognitive decline. She's been more forgetful lately, more resistant to change. We might need to document this for legal purposes." I was forgetting things because I was exhausted from working 60-hour weeks while being undermined at every turn. I resisted change because their changes were often poorly conceived and would damage client relationships I had nurtured for decades. They weren't concerned about me. They were constructing a legal case to declare me incompetent. That's when I realized I could not simply step down and hand them the business. They did not deserve it. They had not earned it, and they would destroy what Robert and I had built. That night, I sat in my home office, the same space where Robert and I had once worked on the books together, planned our expansion, and dreamed about the future. I trembled, not from sadness but from rage. I picked up the phone 3 times to call David, to scream at him, to demand an explanation. 3 times I put it down. If I have learned anything in my 71 years, it is this: anger is useful, but strategic silence is powerful. Confronting them would yield no results. They would deny it, gaslight me, and portray me as paranoid or unstable. They would likely use my emotional response as further evidence of my supposed cognitive decline. No, I would not provide them with that ammunition. I made a decision. I would not confront them. I would not give them the satisfaction of my hurt. I would not reveal my hand. I would remain silent and find another way. The following day at work, I was pleasant and agreeable. When David proposed a new initiative that I knew would waste money, I nodded and said, "That sounds interesting. Go ahead." When Caroline criticized one of our long-standing client relationships, I simply replied, "You might be right. I'll think about that." They seemed surprised but pleased, as if they had finally broken through to me, as if I was becoming reasonable. The transformation was immediate and striking. In meetings, I ceased challenging their ideas. When they made decisions I disagreed with, I remained silent. I began asking them for advice on matters I could have managed effortlessly. "David, I'm not sure about this new software system. What do you think we should do?" "Caroline, you understand social media better than I do. Whatever you think is best." I watched them thrive, believing they had won, that I had finally accepted my place. That week, David stopped by my office. "I'm glad we're all on the same page now, Mom. I know change is hard, but this is beneficial for everyone." I smiled at him. "I trust your judgment, sweetheart." If only he could have seen the relief in something else, something resembling triumph on his face. Caroline grew bolder, making company decisions without even pretending to consult me. She redesigned our logo without approval and committed us to an expensive trade show presence I had not authorized. When I expressed mild objections, she patted my hand and said, "Don't worry about it, Mom. This is what modern companies do. You focus on your transition planning." My transition planning, as if I were a terminal patient preparing for the inevitable. I allowed her to think that, allowing them both to believe I was fading. But every evening, I returned home and worked. I met with Leonard secretly, always at his house or mine, never at his office where we might be seen. I studied corporate law. I reviewed every document, clause, and potential avenue. I became meticulous about what I signed. When David presented me with documents, I read every word, every single word. I began to ask questions. "What exactly does this clause mean, David? Can you explain the purpose of this section?" He would grow impatient. "Mom, it's standard legal language. The attorneys drafted it. You don't need to overthink every detail." But I did. I scrutinized everything and refrained from signing anything that was not absolutely necessary. "I need to have my personal attorney review this first, just to be safe," I would say. David would sigh. You're being paranoid, but fine. Whatever makes you comfortable. He believed I was simply being a difficult old woman, unaware that I was protecting myself. During this time, I also began reconnecting with our employees. Not the executives or the individuals David and Caroline had brought in, but the long term staff who had been with us for decades. I had lunch with our production manager, Frank, who had started as a press operator in 1987. How are things going, Frank? Really? He hesitated before responding. Things are changing, Margaret. Not all of it is good. Some of the new efficiency measures are causing quality issues. We're rushing jobs that should take time. Tell me more, I urged. He did. He informed me about corners being cut, experienced staff being pushed out in favor of cheaper labor, and client complaints being concealed from me. David and Caroline's modernization efforts were damaging the company's reputation, but they were manipulating the books to hide it. I met with Susan, our longest-serving client service representative, who had been with us since 1992. Susan, I need you to be honest with me. How are clients truly responding to the changes? She looked around nervously before leaning in. Margaret, we've lost 3 major accounts in the past 6 months. David told the board they chose to leave, but that's not accurate. They left because we missed deadlines and the quality wasn't what they expected. I tried to tell him, but he said I was being resistant to change. 3 major accounts that represented nearly $1 million in annual revenue, and David had lied to the board about it. I collected information quietly and meticulously. I documented everything, not just the legal case against them, but the business case, the evidence that their leadership was actively harming the company. I also began having casual conversations with our bank. Just curious, I inquired about the process for restructuring ownership in a private company. Our relationship manager, Thomas, had worked with us for 15 years and knew our financials intimately. Depends on the structure, Margaret. Why do you ask? Just thinking about the future, estate planning, that sort of thing. But I was planting seeds, ensuring that when the time came for that loan, the bank would already be contemplating it. I was constructing my case piece by piece, brick by brick, in complete silence, and David and Caroline remained oblivious. I became a ghost in my own company. I attended meetings but contributed little. I reviewed documents but refrained from opposing decisions. I was present yet passive, exactly what they wanted. But every night I returned home and worked. I summoned Leonard to my home instead of meeting in his office. I confided everything to him, and he was horrified. Margaret, that clause David had you sign. It's potentially fraudulent if he misrepresented its purpose to you. But proving that would lead to a court battle with your children. Are you prepared for that? I do not want a court battle, I responded. I want the business, all of it. Tell me everything about how the company's ownership is currently structured, Leonard instructed. I explained. Robert and I had been 50-50 partners. When he passed away, his 50% passed to me through his will, leaving me with 100%. However, in an effort to be a good mother and properly integrate my children into the family business, I had restructured, granting each of them 20% and retaining 60% for myself. This meant I still held majority control, barely. The key, Leonard said slowly, is your 60%. As long as you maintain majority ownership, you have ultimate authority over business decisions, including the power to change the ownership structure, the board composition, everything. But the clause David had you sign only triggers if you step down or are deemed incapacitated. As long as you remain active and competent, which you clearly are, it's meaningless. He was attempting to set a trap for the future. Over the next 3 months, we developed a strategy. Leonard consulted with 2 other attorneys specializing in business law and family business disputes. They reviewed every document, clause, and potential angle, ultimately uncovering something David and Caroline were unaware of, something I had even forgotten. Back in 1998, when the business was rapidly expanding, Robert and I had established a buy-sell agreement, a common protection mechanism in partnerships. If one partner wished to exit, or if an irreconcilable conflict jeopardized the business, either party could initiate a buyout process. The agreement specified that the majority owner had the first right to buy out minority shareholders at fair market value, determined by an independent business valuation. It remained valid and legally binding, and I was the majority owner. If you trigger this, Leonard cautioned, you'll need to pay them fair market value for their shares, 20% each. Based on our current revenues and assets, we're looking at probably $3 million per child, $6 million total. Do you have access to that kind of capital? I did not immediately. My assets were tied up in the house, retirement accounts, and the business itself. But Leonard had a solution. We can structure a loan using the business itself as collateral. The company is creditworthy. You have decades of strong financial history. Once you own 100%, you can make decisions about compensation, everything, without anyone blocking you. You could pay off the loan within a few years. It was risky. If the business struggled, I could lose everything. But remaining in the current situation meant losing everything anyway, just slower and more painfully. Let's do it, I said. The next step involved obtaining a business valuation. This had to be airtight. Leonard hired a reputable firm specializing in business valuations for legal proceedings. They spent 6 weeks analyzing every aspect of Hutcherson Printing: revenue, assets, client contracts, market position, everything. The valuation came back at $15 million, meaning each 20% share was worth $3 million, exactly as Leonard had estimated. I took out the loan, the most terrifying decision I had ever made, putting my financial security on the line at 71 years old. But Leonard secured a bank willing to work with me, partly because the business had a strong credit history, and partly because I was assuming majority control, which actually reduced the bank's risk. While all this unfolded, I maintained my facade at work. Sweet, passive, increasingly forgetful Margaret. I began to make small mistakes, nothing catastrophic, but enough to reinforce their narrative that I was slipping. Once, I accidentally sent an email to the wrong client. Another time, I arrived at a meeting on the wrong day. David and Caroline exchanged knowing looks. "Mom's really declining," I overheard Caroline whisper to her brother. "Perfect. Let them think that." I started discussing plans to travel more, expressing fatigue and suggesting they were likely right that I should slow down. Their relief was palpable. They believed they were winning. In February 2016, David scheduled that board meeting, the one from his calendar, to discuss my transition to an advisory role. I told him that sounded fine and that I would be there. Before you continue watching, may I ask you to hit that subscribe button? What happens next is the moment I had been planning for months, and I assure you, it is worth staying for. The board meeting was set for February 18th at 2 p.m. Our board consisted of 5 members: me, David, Caroline, and 2 outside advisors they had brought in the previous year. Although those advisors had seemed neutral before, I had noticed they sided with David and Caroline in every vote. I requested Leonard attend as corporate counsel, and David seemed fine with that, just routine legal presence. The meeting commenced with standard business and financial reports, which were strong. We were having a good year. Client updates followed, nothing controversial. Then David cleared his throat. Item 7 on the agenda: discussion of company leadership structure. He presented slides he had created, professional slides about succession planning, my distinguished career, and how it was time for the next generation to lead Hutcherson Printing into the future. "Mom," he said, his voice gentle and almost pitying, "you've built an incredible legacy, but it's time to let Caroline and me take the company forward. We've prepared a very generous advisory position for you. You would maintain an office, a reduced salary, and of course, you would keep your ownership shares. You just wouldn't be involved in day-to-day operations or strategic decisions anymore. The company needs younger, more dynamic leadership," Caroline added. One of the board advisors nodded. "I think this is a wise and respectful transition plan." They all looked at me, waiting for me to argue, to fight, to create a scene that would confirm their portrayal of me as the difficult, unreasonable old woman. I did not. I simply turned to Leonard. "I believe you have some documents to distribute." Leonard opened his briefcase and produced folders, 5 of them. He placed one in front of each person at the table. "What's this?" David asked, his confidence wavering slightly. "Please open the folders," I instructed calmly. As they did, I observed their expressions shift from confusion to shock to horror. This is notice, Leonard stated formally, that Margaret Hutcherson, as majority owner of Hutcherson Printing, is exercising her rights under the buy-sell agreement established in 1998 to purchase all minority shares of the company. What? Caroline's voice rose, shrill. You can't do that, David exclaimed. I absolutely can, I stated. And I am. You'll find the independent business valuation in your packets. You are each being offered $3 million for your 20% shares, which is fair market value. The agreement stipulates you have 30 days to accept the offer or negotiate. But if we cannot reach an agreement, a judge will enforce the buyout at the appraised value. Mom, David's face had turned pale. You can't be serious. I am completely serious. You're stealing our inheritance, he accused. Your inheritance? I maintained my composure. I generously gave you those shares. Perhaps too generously, as it turns out. But this company is not your inheritance, Caroline. It is my life's work, mine and your father's, and I am not prepared to hand it over to individuals who have spent the last year trying to force me out. We were trying to help you, David insisted. Help me? I retrieved my own folder. Is that what you call the emails where you discussed handling the Margaret problem? The consultant reports you commissioned that recommended my removal, but were never shared with me. The clause you slipped into documents claiming it was routine when it was actually designed to strip my shares if you could get me declared incapacitated? The room fell silent. You were attempting to steal my company, I declared. Did you truly believe I wouldn't notice? Did you think I was that far gone? This is insane, David protested, but his voice lacked strength. We're your children, Caroline said, visibly upset. Yes, you are, I replied, which is why I offered you opportunities, positions, and ownership in this company, and you repaid me by attempting to push me out as if I were nothing, like I hadn't spent 40 years building this business, as if I were merely an obstacle in your way. I stood. You told me I should be grateful you even spoke to me. Do you remember that, David? At the Christmas party last year, you said I should be grateful for what? For being tolerated by my own son in the business I built? He had the decency to look ashamed, but only for a moment. You'll regret this, Caroline hissed. Well, fight it, I challenged. You can tie this up in court for years. Leonard interjected. You're welcome to try, but the buy-sell agreement is ironclad. We've had 3 attorneys review it. You will lose and incur significant legal fees, and the final outcome will be the same. You will be bought out at fair market value. The only question is whether you want to accept the offer now or waste time and money resisting the inevitable. They fought it, of course. They hired their own attorneys, filed motions, and attempted to argue that I was acting out of spite, that the buyout wasn't in good faith, and that I was mentally incompetent. The last accusation particularly infuriated me. I submitted to a full neurological evaluation to prove them wrong. The doctor's report indicated I possessed the cognitive function of someone 20 years my junior. 4 months later, in June 2016, a judge upheld the buyout. David and Caroline each received $3 million for their shares. They ceased speaking to me entirely. I now own 100% of Hutcherson Printing. I paid off the loan 3 years ahead of schedule. I promoted several long-term employees into leadership positions, individuals who had been overlooked while my children pretended to be executives. The company is now more profitable than ever. My grandchildren still visit occasionally, though less frequently. David and Caroline have attempted to turn them against me. However, teenagers are perceptive. They ask questions and seek to understand. I share the truth with them, age appropriately, and allow them to form their own conclusions. Do I wish things had unfolded differently? Certainly. I wish my children had valued me, seen me as a partner rather than an impediment. I wish I could have passed the business to them with pride instead of having to reclaim it forcefully. But I do not regret my actions, not for a moment. This is Margaret Ann Hutcherson signing off from the office that bears my name, only my name. I earned every letter of it. Please subscribe to my channel. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. With love and respect.